Good morning and welcome to Whitney in the Wild, a Liger Partners The Jungle podcast. And we're coming to you from Liger Partner Studios. I'm Whitney Mendoza, your host, and I have a friend of Liger in the hot seat back with me this morning. Welcome back. It's been a while, Kristin.
Thank you. I know. I'm excited.
I'm excited to have you here. Kristin, so first of all, if you're not listening to her podcast, why aren't you? It's the Renew podcast. It's coming on right after this one, so at 9 o'clock, but it's going to be over on Kristin's pages. So look for Andree Group, Andree Group, on all the socials. But Kristin is business and lifestyle strategist, host of the Renew podcast. She's also author of You're Not For Everyone, But You Can Be For Everyone, which we're going to talk about a little bit today.
Okay.
A little bit. Have some inspiration from it.
Nice.
So Kristin, it was like BC 2020,
I don't
2019?
remember life. I think it was 2019.
Before COVID, BC?
I think it was before COVID.
Yeah. We were like out on a balcony somewhere doing a podcast.
Yes.
Had your book come out yet?
No.
Okay, so we hadn't even talked about your book yet.
Right. I know. It's been a minute.
So tell us what's happening then, and tell us about the book, and then we're going to get into our topic, which is the cost of bad business.
So we have Vanessa watching on Facebook. We have a couple of people joining.
Nice.
So
Good morning. Thank you.
Hello,
Welcome if you're
friends.
watching on Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn.
hey, Kristin, Bailey just joined.
Look at that. We've got everybody joining
Good
in
morning.
this morning.
Everybody's
This is
up.
Awesome.
Bright and early.
I know. I like it.
So tell us how you've been. Tell us about your book. and then we're
Been
gonna
good.
jump in.
I mean, BC, it's been a long time. I can't
Yeah.
believe, now that thinking back, it's been a long time because you guys weren't in this
yeah, we weren't
crazy
here.
awesome new studio, which
Yeah.
is good. But it's been fun. I took full advantage of COVID and quarantine and really pushed to get the book out sooner than we had originally planned. So we
Yeah.
upped our time frame a little bit. So it's been fun. It was really cool getting it out and having it out in the world.
Yeah. And tell us a little bit inside the book, what the book is about.
Inside the book. Okay, so here's where it came about. The book's titled You're Not For Everyone. And I've kind of always been that person where, I might be described as a lot, but I wasn't always like that. So what was interesting is, throughout my life, I think the older I have gotten, I've started to realize that it's okay to just be you and not try to cater to everyone else, not try to round out your edges or just stay squarely in your comfort zone. So people kept asking, and this kept coming up with my clients that I was working with, either
Yeah.
personally or professionally. And I was like, I got to get this down because there are a lot of things people could do to just, still be who they want to be and still be awesome and still help others, but really to step into themselves and be themselves. So that's why we did it.
Yeah. Awesome. I love it. By the way, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that you were wearing your animal print earrings and shoes.
I knew I was going to be in the jungle with
Yes.
Whitney today, so
Thank you.
I did have my favorite shoes on. I got
Thank
my animal
you.
print earrings. I got you covered.
I appreciate you
Trying
for
to
representing.
fit in.
This
So.
is awesome. Okay. So part of what I want to pull inspiration from this. So we're going to talk about the cost of bad business.
Yes.
And it's really great that I am married to the producer and we have talks in the car. And he was like, so what are you going to talk to Kristin about this morning? And I was like, well, I was really thinking that the cost of bad business, you have to set the foundation first to even know what that means.
Yes.
So like, what's a good client? What is good business to you? What is ideal versus like, what is not? What would be bad? Be that like the client relationship itself of who you're working with.
Mm-hmm.
On your podcast last week, we talked about, do you come from like this standpoint of positivity versus negativity?
Right.
So either showcasing your benefits versus like possibly tearing down your competition or focusing on how something doesn't work rather than what it does. And it plays into several things that you talk about in your book, which is building your network.
Yes.
Because if you don't have your foundation, you don't even know where to begin to build
For sure.
your network. So let's
Yes.
talk about that first before I share all the secrets in your book.
Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, I think building your network is key, but before you can do that, you really need to know who your people are.
Mm-hmm.
Like I always say, it starts with finding your people. And it could be in your personal friend group, or it could be professionally, because a lot of times people get into business and they try to be all things to all people. and they're miserable. I'll be talking with a client and they're like, well, this client's driving me nuts. And it's usually because they're not their person. They're just not an ideal target market. Target marketing, we talk about it's a great buzzword in business, who's your target market, but it goes deeper than that. It's not just, I want to work with, millennials. It's who in that target market, how do you describe them? And the more you can find the people that you enjoy being around, then it just gets easier to work with them.
Yeah. Well, that's true, because if you go off and do this whole entrepreneurship, starting your own business thing, which is not easy, you want to work with the people that you want to work with.
Yep.
And it's really great if you decide that ahead of time before you start getting into these not good business relationships.
Well, and then if you get into them, you've also got to be willing to get out. So the cool thing, and I know corporations can't do this all the time. I think they can more than they do, but the cool thing with having your own business or being an entrepreneur is you don't have to work with anybody. And I get, it's frustrating to see clients come to me where they're just taking anyone as a client because, like you said, not all business is good business. There comes a tipping point where if the person's driving you nuts, they're probably not the best client to have.
Yeah.
If they're high maintenance, if they're unreasonable, if they don't treat you with the respect that you're treating them, there are a lot of things that go into client relationship way more than what they're paying you.
Yeah.
We have a comment on Facebook, and Michael says the strength to fire a client where the fit isn't right is a cathartic experience, and it's good for both parties.
Michael, so true. So true. And if this is what's funny, because I have a coaching practice, and a lot of my clients, this is one of the hardest things I have to help them work through. Firing clients. Yeah. And it is always, I won't say it's always come easy to me because I follow the energy a lot. So if I feel like somebody's draining me, I try to sever that relationship in a kind way. But you're right, Michael. It's just one of those things where if you can't do that, you're kind of stuck. It's you got to be able to get past the tough guys.
Well, and that Michael's point is a great segue to something else in the book, that you talk about is following your gut. Mm-hmm. Because Isaac and I were discussing this, and I'm like, every business relationship that ended, I could have pointed to signs that said it probably wasn't a client that we should have taken on in the first place. And there aren't many of those.
Right.
And then, again, COVID, right, has also forced a lot of us to lower the bar a little bit and possibly take on some clients that maybe we wouldn't have taken on.
Did it though? Or did people just use that as an excuse?
Okay, well, let's dive into that then. Tell me more.
Well, and I understand last year a lot of people, my business went down significantly from a revenue standpoint.
Yes, okay.
But that doesn't mean that you have to take bad business to get the revenue back up. Maybe you just look at something different. Maybe you get creative about how you prospect or how do you find new clients. Maybe you launch a new revenue stream, which I saw a ton of people do last year. I mean, we did that ourselves. That's why we pushed up the timeline of the book, is just to be able to put something new out there content-wise. Just because business is slow or whatever, it doesn't mean you got to default back to taking cruddy clients. If you do that, you're just back to square one. You've kicked the can down the road.
Yeah. Okay. So what are some signs that we can look for that either say, yes, we're headed in the right direction with this, or abort?
Yeah. Well, I think the first one is gut. And we don't follow that in business or personally, honestly, as much as we should. So if your gut is telling you something is wrong about a person, that's a big red flag. And typically, like you said, you get all these red flags. We just ignore them.
Yep.
So if you're going to ignore them yourself, you've got to make sure somebody else knows that they're the red flags out there too, and talking it through with either, a mentor, a coach, a business partner, something like that. So somebody knows that it's not just you. Because frequently, I'll have people come to me and say, I think this person's being unreasonable. If they're not being unreasonable, I'll tell them, I'm like, I think you're overreacting. But sometimes it just takes that second set of eyes to go, you know what, they're not your person.
Yeah.
They're not a good client.
Yeah. Okay, so what do you think on the philosophy of being able to replace a client before you fire them? So what does that look like in the sense of you're like, okay, I've got this much, this size book of business, but this particular client is really kind of driving me nutso. Do you recommend letting them go right then and there? Is there a process to maybe, that's gonna really hit, the purse pocket,
the bottom line.
if I let them go.
There's a couple components. First and foremost, it depends on the stage of the business. I think when most people are in startup stage, they're pretty much taking anybody just because they're trying to keep the lights on.
Yeah.
Which is another reason why when you get into startup stage and when you start growing, you do need to start sucking some money away in your own little safe place.
Yeah,
so if
good.
you need to fire a client, if you need to hire somebody new, if you need to, kind of retract or expand, either one, you've got revenues to be able to do that. But it can't be your decision on whether or not a client is good. While it is financial, that can't be the main thing you're looking at, because your productivity, if you've got a client who's driving you nuts, it's decreasing your productivity. You don't really want to go out and start prospecting or trying to find new clients or new business because you're just worn out. Mm-hmm. So you've got to figure out there's a lot more to it than just the revenue. Yeah. So if it's affecting you where you're not making good decisions, you're not, some days it just drains you. Yeah. You go home and you're like, ugh, I'm done. That has a much bigger ripple effect than people realize. Yeah. So I think you fire them soon as you realize they're not. As soon as you realize they're not a fit. And there are a couple things. You've got to figure out, is it because they're not a fit for the work you do, or are they not a fit because they're not respecting and treating you good as a business relationship?
Michael comes up with another comment where he says, this is where AI and technology will never be able to reach. You can program intuition, never fear humans.
Yep. I know that's true. AI is becoming so popular, but I'm such a gut feel type of person. I think that's an excellent point. Is algorithms are great, but the algorithms can tell me this is a perfect prospect for me, but if there's just something in my gut, and I don't want to sound all, because I'm not woo woo, I don't want to sound all woo woo with it, but if you're working with somebody they're not a fit, why prolong it? Yeah. On either way. And I would expect clients to do the same thing, where if and usually it's mutual. Usually you can feel it's not a fit.
Yeah. So it's kind of interesting, because I almost feel too like letting go of a client or making a type of pivot in your business where you're attracting certain clients and you're moving away from others, especially as you grow, because again, that's something else you figure out, right? Like as you grow, you change what you're willing to put up with and what you're not. And you can also tell the activities that attract that particular client that you weren't, versus like, well, if I do this, it actually kind of attracts the ones that I'm not so interested in working with. It almost feels like moving or changing banks. Like it's you in your mind, it's like it's just easier to keep them. Yep. It's just easier, right? Yep. It's going to have a far more negative impact in the long run, but our future, nearsighted brains say it's easy to just stay here. Where something that we've been talking about at Liger as a leadership team is we've been putting it in the perspective of, well, if you did this thing now, where would you be in 90 days? Mm-hmm. If you did it right now, look 90 days, where would you be? Right.
That's a great way to look at it.
Yeah.
Because we're always short. It's like little kids. We're always short. You need it now. You want it right now. Yeah. And we don't really think kids can't do that. And for some reason, business owners can't either. But we've got to think, you've got to think further down the road. But here's the truth, though. It's some people don't make changes. And so my rule of thumb is, if you're not going to make a change to do what you need to do, you forfeit the right to complain about it.
Oh, that's good.
Which means if you decide to keep that client, totally fine, don't complain about it. So if you're making a choice, because it is a choice, if you're making a choice to keep a bad client, to take on a bad client, to onboard a client that's not necessarily your target or your ideal market, totally fine. That is a choice you are allowed to make, but you forfeit the right to complain about whatever happens. So you don't get it both. You can't say, I'm going to keep the client, then still fuss and complain for a month that they're a pain in your rear.
I feel like I need to get like that tattooed right here on my forearm. The like, if you're not going to change it, don't complain about it. Yep. Along with our, what was it? #tip the ratio that we talked about last week of 5 positive things for like every 1 negative that pops up.
And we're all, here's the deal. We're all going to have bad clients. And I'm not saying get rid of every bad client at the first, thing, because I've had clients, it's important to remember, you don't know what the client always is going through either. Yeah. So I've had people who were a little difficult, but but they still weren't necessarily a bad client. We just needed to work through whatever things. So there's situational, and then there's true, like, personality traits. Yeah. If it's situational, they're going through a hard time, it's rough, and they're being a little difficult, you can usually get through that. You don't need to fire everybody that it's difficult. Not all clients are going to be a cakewalk. Yeah. But if it's truly a let's call it a character flaw with them, or something that you're not going to change, then you've got to evaluate whether or not it makes sense keeping them.
Yeah, yeah.
Courtney says, "Good morning, guys."
Morning, Courtney.
Courtney, good morning.
Morning. Again, Facebook, and if you're listening on Instagram Live. Okay, so we've kind of talked about making those right decisions and putting those pieces in place to find the clients that you truly want to work with. So let's dive into the cost of not doing that.
Okie dokie.
Because my brain goes to like poor health, lost sleep, lost revenue. Like, I go through the whole list here.
Yeah.
What do you see are the costs of like making that bad business decision or connection?
Here's the thing. We're all going to make bad business decisions.
Yeah.
Frequently. I've made a ton. I've made some great business decisions, and I've made some doozy of a bad ones too. So I wouldn't hold yourself to the standard that every decision has to be fantastic, because you're going to screw up, right? We all are. But the cost of it is, again, this is why we don't want to just look at financial. I mean, when I work with clients, it is very much focused on goals, revenue, growth, things of that nature. So I am first and foremost looking at profitability of a company. So that is obviously something you could lose, but that's why I was saying there's a trade-off. It is the sleep. It's company morale. It's things like, and this is the same thing with firing a bad employee. If you've got a toxic person on your team, they've got to go quick. My rule with employees is slow to hire, quick to fire. So as soon as you find out something's not working, they need to go before they kind of permeate the other team. And clients are kind of the same way, because they're, it is lack of sleep. I don't sleep much anyway, but it's, you'll lose sleep. It's health. It's really your mental well-being, but bigger than that, it's your business. Like, the cool thing about having a business or owning a business is you get to decide what you want that to look like.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't look the way you want it to look, make some changes.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's even the cost of bad business. I mean, it's also those things that you don't even think about sometimes, right? Like if you break up, if you get a divorce with the client and they're not happy about that, they can cause issues
for sure
for your business.
Yep.
Which is something that, you may enter it thinking, okay, I'm going to try to work this out. Mm-hmm. Take on this client, or maybe, and I feel like sometimes it's rare that we get into a business relationship where we didn't know necessarily that that's how that person operates, right? Until it's kind of like dating. You don't really know how
they're
they
keeping the secrets from you.
Yeah.
Yep.
They're really nice in the boardroom, and then you're like, let's ink the deal. And then as soon as they
turn into like
you,
the ears or the horns come out. Yeah.
Those can be like, if you get caught up in that, it could be an ugly divorce. I mean, that's just a really good analogy.
A lot of
for
divorces
it.
are ugly, whether business or otherwise. But it doesn't have to be that way, because there's a couple things. One is you've got to do your work on the front end to see, but you're going to have some relationships that just something comes up where you're like, I did not see that coming. Unlike Rachel, I did not see that coming. But there's also a way to look at it where if you can protect yourself and your business and be you, your other clients, your other people. So if somebody wants to get ugly, your goal is to be so you and be so strong in your business that whatever ugly things they say about it, the other people don't believe them.
Yeah.
So it's like, anybody can
That's
say
good.
whatever they want. You just need to make sure that your clients and your prospects and your persona out in the marketplace is so strong that people are like, I heard that, but I don't believe that.
Yeah.
And we do that. We all have opinions about people and brands and businesses.
Oh, for sure.
And you'll hear it about somebody, you're like, yeah, there's no way that happened.
Yeah.
That's what you want.
Yeah.
And what's funny is other clients will come to your defenses. I remember one time, this was years ago, I had written, this had to have been at least a decade, but it still stands out. I'd written something and somebody commented on it and didn't like what it was, like a blog post or something. And somebody commented, and I was starting to get like, wait a minute, I was all in my feels. I was getting a little upset about people. This before my skin got a little thicker, but I was getting upset about that because I was like, that's not true. And I wanted to come back and go, that's not true. And what was interesting is like 5 or 6 other people that know me that were clients that had worked with me were like, oh no, blah, blah. And they came to the defense, which I thought was really neat. So that's really what it is if you're so yourself and you do a phenomenal job for your clients, I don't think you have to worry about the one bad apple.
Yeah. Yeah.
They'll fade away.
I also think that speaks to, We always talk about working ahead before you need something, right? Like my mind even went to, especially if you're like a service or product based business where you're focusing on getting good reviews as well, like building that up before someone goes on and there's we're in this cancel culture of,
girl, don't get me started on the cancel culture.
one thing goes wrong, there's one tiny misconception, and a lot of times it might be because like somebody didn't even read the directions correctly or something like that.
The fact that we have to have warning labels that say please don't iron your clothes while wearing them should tell you that it's really right. It's like, please don't spray Gorilla Glue in
had
your
to
hair.
bring it up. You had to.
I know Isaac wasn't going to get through without the Gorilla Glue. But it's true. Like, there's going to be people say bad stuff about you.
True.
You have to just ignore. Now, I totally get that it's easy to say. And I'm the first one that'll be like tough on the exterior, that I'm going home and like, did you see what they said? I mean, it hurts.
For sure.
It definitely hurts our feelings.
It does.
But this is where, and I talk about this a lot in the book, this is why knowing your people is important.
Yeah.
You can bash me all day long and I'll be like, whatever. Not my fault you're stupid. But it's, if my people do that, then I would pay attention. So like if one of my closest friends or one of my good clients or things like that, if they were to say, Kristin, you did this bad, or, she's not good to do business with, that would upset me. But I think for the masses, you've got to let it go if they're not somebody that knows you.
Yeah.
I mean, could it ruin but if you get one bad review, I mean, people are going to read it for sure. Because think about it. I order on Amazon all the time.
Of course.
I see all the 5s. What do I go look for?
Exactly.
That 1 star. Let me see what that 1 star wanted to say.
Yeah.
We're all reading it. But as long as the ratios are tipped, where you've got more positives than negatives, don't worry about it.
Well, going back to that, like 90 days from now, I mean, you could be working with a client that you love and they love you and possibly even paying you more. Yeah. And you made time for them by, letting go of the riffraff.
Yes. Because here's the thing, if you're spending, it's not just time, like let's say a bad client takes you're spending 2 hours a week on work you're doing for a bad client. Well, then you're spending another hour being mad about it. You're spending another hour complaining to, your husband, your best friend, your children or whatever about how awful this client is. So that 2 hours of work is now 4 or 5 hours. It's not worth it.
100%.
It's not worth it.
Okay. So if we feel like there's some bad business going on and we're losing some sleep, or maybe we just don't enjoy it anymore. Okay. Maybe it just doesn't fit with our business, because I feel like that's really relevant to COVID too. To your point, we had to pivot and make. I know we got to come up with a synonym. I did Google synonyms for pivot because I was tired of pivoting. What'd you come up with?
Nothing. I don't know. Redirect.
Change.
There's nothing cool.
And then I always think of Friends and pivot.
I know that meme is so poor Ross and that couch.
I know. Yeah. I'm so sorry. Okay. Well, another word for pivot. Everyone had to do that. And maybe you're finding, because I feel like we did a little bit of that where we were like, and part of it was just because things changed due to COVID, our client base. I mean, it was all sorts of changes happening. What are the steps that we can take to file for a divorce from a client if we need to?
All right, so a couple things. First, and I'm going to back up a little bit as we answer the steps. First is you have to first and foremost know your people. You have to know who they are. So you have to be abundantly clear in the type of people you want to work with. And you've got to be able to describe them and explain and know, and you need to know what their pain points are and how you solve them. That's first and foremost. And I feel like most businesses, and I'll say most businesses don't do that. They don't take the time to figure out who are my people, what are their pain points, and how am I solving that for them? So first you've got to do that, because if somebody doesn't fit in that, then it's easier to figure out who needs to get fired. So you find you identify your people, you know them, find them, and engage them. That's the 3 things I always say. Somewhere along that line, if you know your clients and you found them, so finding is the next thing, you've got to find them in the right places. Like if you're clear on who you want, you tell everybody who you want to work with, and you figure out where they are. So typically when the problems come out, it's because we skip one of those steps. And so you know them, you find them, and then you embrace them, which means once you onboard them, or even during the onboarding process, as you're kind of trying to get their business, you've got to really embrace them, get to know them, figure out what makes them tick. The more you can do those 3 steps before they even become a client, the better the fit it's going to be. So I haven't, since I've started doing those things, knowing, finding, and embracing, I haven't had to fire that many people because I did so much work on the front end to make sure they were a good fit. So I think, as you're bringing on new people, that's going to be critical. If some reason you skip some of those steps and you've got some bad apples in the bunch, I would say the first step is to get a second set of eyes on it. Is it just, is it Kristin or Whitney am I just being unreasonable? Because sometimes it is. And that's when you need somebody close to you to be able to say, Whitney, you're overreacting. This is not a big deal. And I do that with clients a lot. Like I have, a particular client now that's dealing with a lot of challenges with a very large client. And some of it I think is 90% of it is on the client, but there's 10% that I think that, she could kind of shift or control a little bit better. So it's getting that second set of eyes. That would be the first thing. And then 2, you've got to look at, we're a business, so you've got to look at deliverables. So what is it they hired you to do, and are you doing it? So the problem is either on you or on them. So I think once you get the second set of eyes, you've got to look at that next thing. Are we doing what we're supposed to do? And if you're not, why? Is it based on them or if it's based on you? If it's based on you and your company, then fix it. That it may not be the client. They may not be a bad client, may not need to be fired. But if you're looking at kind of where the gap is and it's on the client, then you got to figure out, is it a fixable thing or is it not?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's fixable, meaning it's communication. The client wasn't clear on what you needed from them or the expectations. But sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's just this guy or girl's a jerk and we need to go. So once you take those steps where you got your second set of eyes, you're kind of looking at the problem, then you figure out if you need to get rid of them, then it's not a you're a terrible person, we don't want to work with you type of conversation. It's really I feel like you might be better served with another agency. I don't know that our reasons align anything. Values is a big thing. If your values don't align, they have to go. That's not a fixable thing.
Yeah. So that's good. If you have not picked up Kristin's book, I highly recommend that you do. There are, the chapters alone, and then there's quizzes that you can take.
There's some quizzes
to form that foundation or realign, right? Like I know on several of our episodes, we talked about use this time to realign yourself.
Yes.
Don't go through all that you've been through this past year and not use it as an opportunity to change and make things, be that more self-care for yourself or aligning better with your business and discovering what type of clients you want. Or maybe you want to go out and start your business. Maybe you're, it's something that's been on your mind for a while. And this is, and this is the best advice because it's ideal that you do this ahead of time, right? To your point, if you know what your foundation is before you get started and jumping off the deep end, then you're just going to be set up that much better.
Because most people just jump and figure it out. They build the net on the way down, which is, that's okay with some things.
Yeah.
But you got to think at some point.
Yeah.
Even if you're going to leap first, you kind of got to think after you leap.
Yeah. Oh, so real quick as we close, your event that's coming up.
Yes.
On March 25th. Tell us about it.
I'm very excited about it. So I know because we're
having
it here at Liger Studio. So we have, I have the opportunity to work with some phenomenal clients, but I realize, through my speaking, coaching, everything, I can't hit everybody. So we launched the Renew Community, which is kind of our group, our community of people where I come in and coach people from a group standpoint. Everybody gets to collaborate and all this. Well, we launched the end of last year. We've got some incredible entrepreneurs in there. Like we have some really cool people. But we've been online, so we're doing our very first live event, and it is going to be here at the Liger Studios because Whitney was kind enough to let me and you guys, if you guys haven't seen the space, this is a cool space.
We've been enjoying it. Yeah,
I know. It's like I just sit here. I finish my podcast. I'm like, I'm just going to hang out for a little bit. But we're doing a live event here, so it's Renew Live. And our focus with the community each month, the coaching I do from the group, it's on a different theme. So this month we're talking about marketing and creative marketing. So Ms. Mendoza here is going to be our guest speaker for that event and sharing all her wisdom about different ways that entrepreneurs and businesses can market themselves. So I'm excited, one, because we get to do it at Liger Studios, but two, if we're talking marketing, Liger's your team.
I'm excited.
I know.
It's
I think
gonna
it'd be
good
cool.
event. Yeah.
So we'll have some mixing, some mingling. Whitney will share her expertise, and we're gonna see what cool new people want to come hang out with our community.
Yeah. And we will post a direct link where this video is so everyone can go and register. But if you use code Liger, Liger, you get in absolutely free.
Whitney's giving you the code to get in
Giving
free.
the code.
Yep.
Got the code.
All the Liger guests get in free. Absolutely.
I love it.
I know.
All right, so go right now. As soon as this is done, Andree Group, Andree Group on all social media, because Kristin's podcast is coming up at 9:00. You have your daughter with you.
I do have my daughter with me. And we're going to, because one of the things we're talking about, and you mentioned it earlier, is we all have this opportunity right now to kind of shift and change and use the time to do something really cool. And as a teenager, she's done that during this last year, and it's been super cool. So we're going to talk about that.
Yeah, and she's got are those bell bottoms?
She does
What
have
are
her
they
bell bottoms
considered?
on today. No,
She's
they're bell
cool.
bottoms. They're
Not skinny. She is in, you guys.
They are retro. They're no skinny jeans. No skinny jeans for
She
this
looks
girl.
cool.
I know. It's a very cool outfit. I told her, I was like, you might need to stand during the podcast. So
She should, right here.
proper leg up. There
Yeah,
we go.
so you can see. All right. Well, thank you, Kristin, for
Thanks
coming
for
on my
having me.
podcast.
Thanks for inviting me into the jungle.
No, you survived.
Got
I
it.
knew you would. You helped me survive the jungle, so
I like it. I like it.
awesome. Well, thank you so much for tuning in. Catch a new episode of A Jungle Podcast tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. We'll see you then.